Welcome to DABCC Radio,
where smart people listen.
Virtualization and Cloud Talk,
Featuring cutting-edge solutions from the hottest companies around the globe.
broadcasting from the DABCC offices in sunny Sarasota, Florida.
Surrounded by computers, books, and Legos.
A Microsoft MVP, Citrix Charter CTP, VMware vExpert.
And your host, Douglas Brown.
Everyone, and welcome to another episode of DABCC Radio. We have a fabulous show. We have DataCore back in the line, and we're going to learn more fabulous stuff. These guys are smart. So today we have one of their technical geniuses with us, Sushant, and he is going to talk all about what they're doing in the hyper-converged area, and definitely more about how fast they are and much more. So this is a great podcast. I always do the intro and closing after the fact, so I know it's a great podcast. And I think you guys are really going to love it. So with no further ado, here's my interview with Sushant from DataCore Software. I'm looking forward to this podcast. We've done done 3 now with DataCore, and I just, three in a row pretty much, or May on. And, and they're some of my favorite podcasts. So I'm really excited about this one. Let's see if you can up the game and make these guys look silly.
Oh yes, that's always my goal. Set the standard.
Yeah. So that being said, can you tell me who you are and what do you do over at DataCore?
Sure. My name is Sushant Rao. I run product marketing at DataCore. Just a little bit of background about me. I've been with the company for about 2.5 years, joined in 2014. Prior to that, I've been in product management, product marketing for about, honestly now, like 18, 19 years. Most recently, I was with a couple of startups, and then before that, VMware and HP. So, got a bit of a infrastructural background, so to speak.
Yeah, you definitely do. And like I mentioned, DataCore is a phenomenal company, and everyone I was telling you before the podcast, and I totally mean it. Everyone over there is brilliant, and I'm not just talking smart, but really brilliant people. So the guys listening, please continue listening to this one, but definitely go back and listen to the other 3 that we recorded because they're just brilliant people. I don't think DataCore understands how to hire even smart people.
Anyway. Well, hopefully I can live up to that billing.
Yeah, I'm excited. So yeah, I'm definitely excited. But now I'm rambling, right? Anyway, so let's get going. So can you tell me a bit real quick about what your area within DataCore, what DataCore is trying to do, things of that nature?
Sure. So DataCore has developed technology really focused on I/O, right? So anything related to I/O. And so with the kind of first instance of the product was related to software-defined storage and really trying to help companies, kind of do for storage what VMware did for servers, which is if you think about server storage today, you've got single point of management. You can't manage other devices, even if they're from the same company, different models. All the capacity is isolated to that device. It's really hardware dependent. And if you think about your servers, it's not like that at all, right? You can put a Dell box next to a HP box next to a Supermicro box, and you can manage it all with virtualization. Now, of course, you want to create clusters of similarly, kind of servers which have similar capabilities. But generally, with what VMware allowed companies to do is manage it all together, be able to move applications around these servers, just like they were kind of one pool or kind of one pool of compute. So you can move it from, server A to server B to server C and not really have any impact to your application, right? There was no application downtime in order to do that. So there was a lot of flexibility, agility, as well as the whole point of consolidation. So they were able to up the utilization of servers. And if you think about storage, it's just not like that at all, right? You take a HP storage and you put it next to an EMC storage, and they will never meet. You can't share capacity. You can't manage them the same way. They've got their own processes, procedures. Everything's real different. So kind of the first product we came out with was really focused on software-defined storage and kind of taking away these silos of storage and being able to pool storage together or provide single pane management. So that's kind of product one. The second product we've introduced is in the area of hyperconverged, and it is basically software that takes essentially x86 servers with direct attached storage and turns them into hyperconverged infrastructure. So we're able to work with any hypervisor and essentially any x86 server. Now, again, there's kind of certain minimum classes of servers that will work better than others, but generally, if it's an x86 server, you can turn it into a hyperconverged infrastructure.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah. So why is hyperconverged needed? Well, what's the big deal with this? Well, why?
So a couple things, right? So I would say the first thing, if you think about virtualization, server virtualization, the most, you ask people like, what are the benefits you've seen? They talk about agility, flexibility, consolidation. The one thing they won't talk about is performance. And in fact, surveys have shown that people who virtualize have often seen their applications slow down. And when they've kind of done some root cause analysis and kind of say, okay, what's going on? Why is this my VM slow? They found out that it was really an I/O bottleneck. Virtualization was really creating I/O bottlenecks. Storage systems couldn't handle it. And so what ended up happening was people would, if they could consolidate their servers, they'd have to scale out their storage. Oftentimes they'd have a project, they'd have to buy project-specific storage. And so essentially infrastructure, which server virtualization was supposed to simplify and consolidate, didn't really happen, right? Infrastructure is still kind of a mess. And so people said, there's got to be a better way to do this. And the better way was hyperconverged. And so with hyperconverged, what you get is in a single tier, you get both your compute and your storage, and they're all connected by your network. So the idea was, hey, if I can combine servers and storage into a single tier, boy, I could radically simplify my infrastructure. And so that's kind of where hyperconverged came out, was this need to really simplify and consolidate infrastructure, reduce the complexity.
Makes sense. Now, when someone thinks hyperconverged, we think like Nutanix or something of that nature. Where does DataCore play? What's your overall value and benefit when it comes to hyperconvergence, and then also compared to their sort of flavor of it, so to speak?
Sure. So that's a good question, right? So actually, one of the things you'll find in hyperconverged is there is a lot of vendors in the space. Some are appliance-based, like Nutanix, SimpliVity, VMware VVols. Some are software-based, right? So VMware vSAN is an example of that. DataCore is another example of that. And so, so kind of that's one big difference, right? Is your software tied to the hardware? So if you're looking at products like SimpliVity, VMware VVols, Nutanix, it's tied to the hardware. You cannot, one of the things you thought you would get, which is, I can kind of mix and match. No, that doesn't happen with those appliances. So you kind of are stuck in this silo where you can only, if you want to add more hardware, guess what? You only have one vendor you can go to. Software-based approaches, which DataCore is one, offer you a lot more flexibility, but that's not the real calling card, I would say, of DataCore. The biggest reason that people should consider DataCore for hyperconverged is performance. So remember when I talked about earlier about virtualization slowing down applications? Well, the biggest impact it had, not only on kind of run-of-the-mill applications, but also your kind of mission-critical Tier 1 applications. They were starving for I/O, and that's where companies, and IT departments really heard the user complaints. It's your databases, your enterprise applications that were running slow. And right now, I would say that if you look at most hyperconverged deployments, they're primarily, I would say, VDI or kind of file and print, but kind of low load type applications. Comparatively, so if you look at VDI, the number of IOPS they see is probably in the range of say 25 or less, and sometimes they go up to 50, even a little bit higher when they're doing kind of boot up and shut down. But if you're looking at enterprise applications and databases, you're talking hundreds, if not thousands, of IOPS. And so there really is a different class of performance level that's needed if you're considering running things like SQL Server or Oracle or other applications like that. And so what DataCore has been able to do is really using our parallel I/O technology, not only provide the IOPS that these applications need, but even more importantly, right? Everyone talks about IOPS as a measure of IO performance, but the real measure that people should look at is latency, right? You drive down latency, that's when your applications really start running fast. And so we're able to do both. We're able to increase the IOPS as well as drive down the latency in our hyperconverged systems using our parallel IO technology. And so that's the big reason why companies are looking at DataCore, because they want to use this hyperconverged infrastructure to go beyond VDI. They want to say, hey, I've got a SQL Server, or I've got these SQL Server VMs. I'd like to create a cluster. I'm thinking of doing hyperconverged. And with DataCore, they can. They get the performance that they need with, kind of all wrapped up in the benefits with a hyperconverged deployment.
That's great. And along those lines, in our previous podcast, we talked about you guys being the world's fastest storage, and you recently won some awards for it and things of that nature. Can you explain about that in more detail and maybe some of the specifics of being the world's fastest?
Sure. So that's a great point. So, one of the questions people ask is, okay, so how do you get to claim you're the world's fastest? What's your benchmark, right? And so when you look at hyperconverged systems or pretty much any kind of virtualized infrastructure, the key bottleneck, as we talked about earlier, is I/O. So in order to kind of measure the performance of DataCore Hyperconverged, we went and looked at for the most kind of rigorous I/O benchmark. So there's a group called the Storage Performance Council, and they they make available a benchmark called SPC1. It's a pretty interesting benchmark because it basically simulates the I/O load from an OLTP database, right? So you're talking about kind of enterprise applications and databases. It is peer-reviewed and independently verified, so you can run the benchmark. But anyone on the Storage Performance Council reviews your results. They actually audit you to make sure you haven't cut any corners. It runs across. It's been run for a number of years, so you can see it across different generations of technology. You can even go back to kind of SAS arrays and SATA arrays and kind of say, what was their I/O performance, all the way up through all flash arrays, right? So some of the major enterprise storage vendors have run this SPC1 benchmark with which you would consider the king of the hill in terms of I/O performance, all flash arrays. So NetApp, EMC, Dell, and HPE have all run this benchmark on their all flash arrays, so you can actually compare the performance from hyperconverged to all flash arrays and say, okay, well, how does this, if I'm looking at deploying a SQL server, what kind of I/O would I get from, using it on this infrastructure with an all flash array versus if I did hyperconverged? And the last part that's pretty interesting is not only do you have to put in the hardware configuration and the software, you also have to cost it out. So not only do you have to mention, not only do you have to, publish your performance numbers, right, IOPS and latency, they also look at the total cost. So now you can figure out price performance, right, which is kind of a good measure of value. And in that benchmark, right, so there's kind of three numbers you have to look at. It's SPC1 IOPS, it's latency, and it's also price performance, which is, kind of cost per SPC1 IOPS. So with DataCore, we ran this in a hyperconverged configuration, and compared to the all-flash arrays, which were king of the hill, they had the best numbers to date. DataCore was able to surpass them. So in terms of IOPS, the DataCore Hyperconverged was about 1.2 million SPC1 IOPS. The all-flash arrays, I think, maxed out somewhere around 500,000 to 600,000 IOPS. So compared to the next best, we're almost double. Then if you look at latency, which is the real measure of performance, I think the best was a NetApp all-flash array, which was at 0.76 milliseconds of latency, which is great. But DataCore was 0.22 milliseconds of latency. So we're about 2.5 times faster compared on response times. So that's pretty significant if you want your enterprise applications to run fast, right? The question that people should ask is, okay, tell me about price performance, right? How much is it costing me per SPC1 IOP? And in that measure, DataCore was at 10 cents per SPC1 IOP, which was about 60% less than the next closest, which was, I believe, an HPE all-flash array. So if you look at all three measures, right, IOPS, latency, and cost per, dollar per SPC1 IOPS, DataCore is significantly better than all-flash arrays when it comes to all those measures. So that's kind of where we come we're able to say with DataCore, you get the world's fastest hyperconverged, right? Compared to anything else out there, you're getting the best and the best value.
That's the word I was looking for, benchmarking. So that's impressive. 2x best of on IOPS, 2.5 fastest on latency, and then the cost. Wow, that's just great. So listeners, definitely for even more information about these tests, benchmarks, and things, definitely refer to the couple previous podcasts we did with DataCore. They dive even more into it, and it's really quite impressive. It's just very impressive. So that being said, why do companies need this kind of performance? Isn't what we have adequate, right? So what kind of or maybe a better question is, what kind of applications and use cases require this?
That's a good question. So the benefits, I think you will see, is kind of there's a couple of different ways to think about the benefits. The first is if you want to, kind of speed up your application. So the key applications that your users will complain about, right? So your enterprise applications and databases, you're running SQL Server, Oracle, CRM, ERP system. All of these systems, put a tremendous load on in terms of I/O. And so you need this performance to get these applications running fast. And in fact, when companies have deployed this, they actually get calls, unsolicited calls from their users saying, hey man, I don't know what you guys did, but this application is running really fast now, right? I'm not seeing any performance degradation, right? Great job. And so, it's really great when your customers are telling you like, oh yeah, our IT departments are not getting kudos for the kind of, speed of the application. The users don't know what happened. All they know is that it's running faster. So there's that aspect, but it also makes a difference when you think about even things such as VDI and kind of run-of-the-mill applications, because the amount of infrastructure that you need to run these applications is also less when you have that kind of performance. So, for example, when you look at performance benchmarks, Nutanix can run about 7 or 8 VMs per node, and they're running about 2 or 3, maybe I think it's 2,000 to 3,000 IOPS per VM. With DataCore, we can run about 30 VMs per node, and each of these VMs is running about 4,000 plus IOPS. So what that means is, sure, you can scale out, but you need fewer nodes with DataCore than you need with someone like Nutanix. So, if you're trying to run, say, 30 or 40 VMs, right, with Nutanix, you're talking about 5, 6 nodes to do it. With DataCore, right, you're basically looking at 1 to 2 nodes. Now, again, you want to definitely go with 2 because of high availability, but if you wanted to, you could just run it on 1. So what that means is less infrastructure, and that has kind of 2 benefits. One is CapEx, so the amount of money you have to spend on, think of it on hardware is less, but also licenses, right? Every node has, kind of this license tax, whether it's vSphere or something else that you have to pay, so you can have fewer nodes means fewer license dollars. But there's also the operational costs, right? So if you think about power, space efficiency, cooling, even your management time, all of those decrease with the fewer boxes, right? So if you have to, in one in one setting, you're running, say, 10 nodes, and another you're running 2, it's a lot less work to manage 2 than it is to manage 10, right? So, and that can kind of scale up from there, right? So if you're talking about now 200 nodes versus saying, you only have 30 to 40 nodes, that's still significantly better, right? It's much less infrastructure, both from a kind of hard dollar cost as well as kind of some of your soft dollars, which is coming your indirect costs.
Makes sense. But you're saying less servers, which is great for customers, right? But resellers is not, what they like to hear. So what's in it for them? Why should I'll leave it at that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting question, right? And so, kind of what I'll allude to is kind of if you look at what happened with server virtualization about 10 years ago, right? When server virtualization came out, some resellers were like, what? I'm going to sell fewer servers? I don't get why I would do this, right? And they, of course, maybe the servers are more powerful and things like that. But they were still selling fewer servers, so their top line revenue was going to go down with server virtualization. So there were resellers who said, "Yep, I'm just not going to do it." And what ended up happening was the resellers who looked at this and said, "Okay, this is the way of the data center of the future. Let me get on this server virtualization." There are the resellers who, over the last 10 years, have done extremely well because this is the way data centers have gone. And I think for resellers, right, they have a kind of the place they want to be is the trusted advisor. They are the ones who are bringing to their customers kind of vetted solutions that say, these solutions would be really helpful to you. But if a reseller says, no, I'm going to drop my top line, I'm not going to do this, right? Guess what? There is another reseller out there who is going to be looking at this and saying, hey, this is a great solution, right? I can increase performance, I can decrease costs, right? I can deliver a better solution to my customers. They're going to find that there's other customers out there that are not being told about the solution, and then they're going to start doing that. So there's always that risk that if a reseller starts focusing too much on their, I'm going to start losing revenue. No, I'd rather sell more boxes. Some other reseller may come in and displace them as the trusted advisor because they're offering a kind of a better solution than what you may be offering. And so it's always a risk, right? To a certain extent, server virtualization, when only a few resellers are doing it, resellers can get away with not having to, explain to customers why they weren't doing it. But when, that trend just took off, the ones who were kind of the early people on that train were the ones who had the most expertise, kind of had the most deployments under their belt. They're the resellers who, over the last 5 to 10 years have done extremely well. And so this is, again, the same kind of question. If you're a trusted advisor, you really need to be thinking about, is this the best solution for my customers, and thinking it from their point of view. And if it is, it kind of is beholden on you to do that. And if you don't, guess what? Someone else will.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think that, the good integrators out there, it's not a problem. It's, although, sometimes, but yeah, what do I say? At the end of the day, you got to sell the right solution for the problem. That's just all there is to it. And,
yep.
And there's a lot of them out there that do. You bet. So, I want to talk a bit about, what it takes to install this thing. Well, what does it take to get it up and running, and then what?
Okay, that's a good point. So there's kind of two ways you could approach it. So there's some people who kind of like to do it themselves. And so, we talked about we're a software solution. So they, can get the software from us. They, we can provide them reference architectures on what configurations they should have depending on the kinds of workloads they want to run. Are they running enterprise class applications? Are they running VDI? Are they running kind of run of the mill? And so these, kind of think of it as different kinds of size configurations for the types of workloads. They can, once we provide them the rough specs of what they should look for, they can then go to any x86 server vendor to, pick the vendor of their choice or their favorite one, get the hardware, and then they install the software. And the software is pretty easy to install. We've got these smart deployment wizards, whether it's for vSphere, whether it's for Hyper-V, that really make it easy to get this set up. Once you get it set up, then it's like any other kind of virtualized infrastructure, right? You just deploy VMs, it starts running, and you kind of set it and forget it. You don't really even have to think about it until that point where you need to kind of grow your cluster. And I'll talk about what that means in a second. So that's kind of option one. The other option is you can, some people prefer more of an appliance form factor, meaning that they get the hardware, software, all as kind of one package. So we have that available as well. So through our hardware partners. So you can choose from a reseller to get it already, kind of like an appliance, which includes the software and hardware. And then all you got to do is rack it up. Again, the smart deployment wizards walk you through the configuration so you can get up and running pretty quickly. So in that case, you have the hardware coming with the software. But the good news is that when you need to then add additional nodes, because we are fundamentally a software company, you can pick any x86 server vendor that you want. So even if you got it as an appliance, you don't have to go with that same vendor for your next set of hardware. nodes, you can go pick any other vendor. Right? Again, we would recommend that, if you put it in a cluster, that you get, kind of configurations that are somewhat similar, right? You don't want a really powerful server in the same cluster, a very low powered, because your applications will start seeing performance differences. But if you get it somewhat reasonably consistent, it becomes pretty easy to scale out as needed, which is the third aspect, right? So now you're getting to the point of, okay, I got it set up, I've got it running, everything's going great. Now I need to scale out. Now, this is where you have to, you have to take a step back and think about hyperconverged a bit. And the reason I say that is hyperconverged, makes it really simple because it combines storage and servers kind of into a single tier. So that's also a problem because now your compute growth and your data growth are essentially commingled. So if you think about those two growth rates in your environment, most people will say that, no, my compute and my data is growing at different rates. And in fact, it's usually the data that's growing, growing much faster than compute. So what that means is companies will find that they will need to scale out their storage capacity much sooner than they will have to scale out their compute. Now, with most hyperconverged vendors, the only way you can do that is by adding additional nodes, right? So they always talk about scale out, right? Adding additional nodes to get that additional storage capacity. So you could do that with DataCore. You can add you can add nodes, but we also provide another mechanism. And that other mechanism is to use the device that is great for storage capacity, and that is a SAN. So if you would like, you can actually auto-tier with your hyperconverged cluster, a SAN. So your hot and warm data would be sitting on your hyperconverged cluster. Your cold data, right, which is the majority of your data, would be sitting on a SAN. And the good news with DataCore is we do it on a sub-LUN level basis, and we do it automatically. So what that means is you set it up, and again, then you forget about it. We can scale out the storage capacity using a SAN if you'd like, or additional nodes. But then your hot and warm data is still sitting on your hyperconverged cluster. So as the application is running, they don't have to go to the SAN to get either reads or writes, right? We just automatically tier that data. So it's either sitting on your, kind of closest to your applications.
Makes sense. That's phenomenal. You have basically every option there, right?
Yes, right. And the other aspect that's kind of interesting is, and we're starting to hear it from some customers is, some of the early adopters of hyperconverged have started to realize that, when they went with hyperconverged, they created yet another silo in their environment because it had different management, it had different processes for backing up, right? All these different things. And one of the other advantages with DataCore is you can integrate it into your kind of main infrastructure, right? So we talked about the auto-tiering, but you can also get single pane management for your hyperconverged as well as the rest of your storage infrastructure. So from that perspective, you really do get the benefits of kind of a fully integrated solution, not just hardware, software, but also to your existing environment, right? So you're not creating yet another silo that you then have to kind of manage separately and train separately.
That's a very good point. I never thought of it that way, but I think you're exactly correct. Yeah. Huh. Interesting. So that being said, I wanted to move into the competition question, but you've answered that in many ways throughout the podcast, and I even ask you about some of the different players. So is there anything else you'd like to add to that question, or?
I think we've covered most of it, but kind of let me kind of summarize, right? Which is, kind of at a broad scope, you've got two different categories of kind of alternatives. You have the appliance vendors, right? And, it's funny because you'll even hear some of them talk about how their magic's in the software, that their software-defined storage sitting on hyperconverged. But really, their software is tied to that hardware. For example, some of these vendors, right, their software can come from an appliance from different manufacturers, right? You can get it from them, you can get it from Lenovo, you can get it from Dell. But guess what? All of those boxes don't necessarily work together. So you have to be careful to say, okay, so if this is really, kind of software defined, can I mix and match? And that's a real question. And then the other question is, who can I get if I want to scale, if I want to add more nodes, who can I purchase this from, right? And you want to give yourself the most flexibility because the vendor you're doing business with today, right, a year from now, you may not want to. You may get another vendor who's got better capabilities, and you want to be able to have that choice. So that's kind of one category of vendor. The second category is the kind of folks who have software. Now here, right, you get some flexibility. You get a lot of flexibility because you get to choose what kind of hardware. But with DataCore, you can also choose to get it as software, but also as an appliance. And then the next question is, okay, but if I get it as an appliance, can I, pick the vendor, and with DataCore you can. The other aspect that comes up, not too much, but it does because people are started to diversify their virtualization offering, is what hypervisors do they work with. So for something like VMware, vSAN, guess what? Only works with one hypervisor, which is vSphere. DataCore is hypervisor agnostic, so you could use us with vSphere, you could use this with Hyper-V, you could use this with KVM, right? We don't really care. That's kind of really up to you in terms of what makes sense, right? So if you want to have a hyper-converged cluster with Hyper-V, you can do it. You can have it sitting side by side with a vSphere hyper-converged cluster. So those are all options that you have available to you. And then as you start thinking about it more, right, you start off with the initial selection criteria, which is about performance, which is about availability, which is, kind of how are you going to manage this. But then you should also think about your, how does it fit in with your existing environment, single pane management, as well as how do you scale out storage capacity independent of compute. These are all really important questions because we've talked to some customers who had purchased a different solution, and when they realized that they were kind of locked in, they said, you know what, when this is kind of end of life, we are going to switch to something that gives us more flexibility. We don't want to be tied in. And so those are some of the things that you should think about so that, you don't regret your purchase decision.
Makes a lot of sense. And for my last question, or second to last question, is future.
Sure.
What can we expect from you guys in the future?
Really good question. I think we, kind of, as opposed to some companies that really, kind of focused on, building an appliance, we focused on kind of the areas of performance, availability, management to start. And so, for us going forward, I think we've, if you talk to our customers, you'll see that, by and large, we've been able to deliver on that. So where we're trying to, kind of go forward is probably in the area of, kind of adding more appliance vendors, partners. So for those companies that choose to say, I'd rather just, you tell me what configuration, I'll just go get it from and get it all as one package, right? So we've got a few today. We're going to increase that. And the second thing is to really simplify it even more, right? And tie it very tightly between our software and the hypervisor, so it's as seamless as possible. Right. That is probably a couple of the areas that we want to improve on. Right. Not to say that it's not now, but you can always improve. And I think making it even simpler in the future is kind of where we're headed.
That's great. That's great. Well, last question is if somebody wants to learn more, what do they need to do?
Good question. So, kind of the best thing to do is contact DataCore. You can even we can give you a demo of the software in about 15 minutes, so you can see how it runs, the UI, right? How easy it is to set up as well as to scale. But come to datacore.com. You'll see a thing for our trial as well as get a 15-minute demo, which is probably the best ways to kind of explore what the DataCore Hyper-converged offering can do.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you very much. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and you definitely did a great job. So I love listening to you guys. I really honestly do. So I always joke, my favorite part about the podcast is I get to learn along with them because I listen to it twice, right?
Oh, okay.
Once as we record it, and two, then I go back and edit it, although we don't have any editing, but I go back and listen to it one more time. So
excellent. Well, hopefully I lived up to the DataCore, smartest people in the room.
You definitely did.
Brand.
You definitely did. So, yeah, absolutely. So on that note, thank you very much.
Well, Doug, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, that concludes another successful episode of DABCC Radio. I really like these DataCore episodes. I hope we do more. I told you before we were doing a series of 3, but I really like these. So I love listening to these guys, and I hope you enjoyed the show as much as I do. But more importantly, I hope you check out what they're doing, because it is truly rocket science. It's not the typical. Gosh, look into their parallel I/O stuff. Wow, is all I could say. So, I'm always left speechless when I talk to a DataCore person, whoever that may be. So, great people. So, if you're at a conference, you see DataCore, stop by. Trust me, these guys are great. And definitely check out the technology. So, thank you very much, Sushant, for doing this with me. I really, really enjoyed it. And on that note, guys, if you enjoyed the episode as much as I do, if you enjoy any of these episodes, please tell a friend. That's how we grow. Let them know the DABCC Radio. You love it. You can tweet about it. I always like that. Retweet the tweets that we tweet. And visit the website www.dabcc.com for the latest and greatest virtualization, cloud storage, news and support resources, mobility, you name it, it's all up there. Check out our mobile apps. If you like this podcast, you can also download our mobile app for the iOS. And we have news apps for both Android and iOS. So download those from your favorite app store. Just search for DABCC and they will come on up. And what else do I say? But again, thanks to my guests, Sushant today, and DataCore, and to each and every one of you guys for listening to DABCC Radio.
Can you say DABCC?
DABC.
Say it again, DABCC.
DABC.
Can you say it again, DABCC?
DABC.
How about DABCC?
DABC.
DABCC.
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 DABCC.